"Your mother is going to ruin our Christmas," screamed Brittany, my daughter-in-law, shoving me toward the door with such force that I almost fell. It was 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve. Inside, the lights on the tree twinkled, the music was blaring, and I could hear the laughter of my son Jason, her entire family, and their guests. Outside, I was a 72-year-old woman standing in the building's entryway while the temperature dropped to 20 degrees. "Please, Brittany, just let me in," I begged, pounding on the door. Silence. She didn't even dignify me with a response. What they didn't know was what they would find when they opened that door the next morning. And believe me, what they saw left them completely shocked. But let me tell you how I got there. My name is Eleanor. I am 72 years old, and until 6 months ago, my life made sense. My husband Arthur had passed away from a sudden heart attack in May, and from that moment on, all I had left was my son. Jason was my whole world. The boy I nursed, the teenager I defended when no one else would, the man I watched fall in love with Brittany 3 years ago. She seemed charming at first. A perfect smile, kind words, hugs that felt sincere. But after the wedding, something changed. The visits became spaced out. The calls got shorter, and I, in my loneliness, clung to every crumb of attention my son gave me. That Christmas Eve, Jason had invited me to dinner. "Mom, come over to the house. Brittany is making something special," he told me on the phone 3 days earlier. My heart almost exploded with happiness. I spent those days cleaning my apartment, choosing what to wear, and buying gifts with the little money I had from my Social Security check. I spent almost $100 on a perfume for Brittany and a leather wallet for Jason. I wanted them to know how much I loved them. I wanted to belong to that family again. I arrived at 8 o'clock in the evening, just as they had asked. I rang the doorbell with trembling hands, carrying a bag with the gifts wrapped in gold paper. Brittany opened the door. She was wearing a sparkly red dress, impeccable makeup, and had a glass of wine in her hand. "Oh, Eleanor, you're here," she said without smiling. She didn't even tell me to come in. I stood on the threshold like a stranger. Inside, I could see a group of people laughing, eating, toasting. They were all her family. Cousins, uncles, friends. No one I knew. Jason was in the back, talking animatedly with an older man. He didn't even turn to look at me. "Come in, but stay in the kitchen." "I have to finish preparing dinner," Brittany finally said, letting me enter. I sat on a chair by the kitchen table, watching her chop vegetables with brusque movements. The noise of laughter in the living room was deafening. I felt invisible, a ghost in my own family. "Do you need help?" I asked timidly. "No, you just sit there and don't get in the way," she replied without looking at me. I swallowed hard. The lump in my throat grew with every second. But I stayed quiet. I didn't want to ruin the night. At 9 o'clock, Brittany started serving dinner. She carried platter after platter to the dining room table. Turkey, stuffing, salads, pies, wine. Everything looked delicious. I remained in the kitchen, hoping someone would call me. No one did. I heard when everyone sat down. I heard the toast. I heard the laughter. And I was still there, alone, with an empty stomach and a broken heart. I got up slowly and walked toward the dining room. Maybe it had been a misunderstanding. Maybe they just forgot to tell me. But when I reached the entrance to the living room, Brittany saw me, and her face changed completely. "What are you doing here?" she asked loudly. Everyone stopped talking and looked at me. Jason looked up from his plate. "Mom, what's wrong?" he said, as if I were the one doing something wrong. I thought you would be dining with me," I whispered. Brittany let out a dry laugh. "Eleanor, I told you to stay in the kitchen. This is a family dinner, for real family, not for people who come to ruin everything with their sad faces and widow stories." I felt as if I had been slapped. Tears began to burn my eyes. "Brittany, she is my mother," Jason said, but his voice sounded weak, lacking conviction. "Exactly, Jason. She is your mother, not mine. And I am tired of pretending I care." I stood paralyzed. Everyone at the table watched me with discomfort, but no one said anything. No one defended me. Jason looked down and continued eating. "It would be better if you left, Eleanor," Brittany continued, getting up from her chair. "This is my house, and I don't want you ruining our Christmas with your bitter woman energy." She walked toward me with firm steps. I backed away. "Brittany, please, I just want to be with my son." I said with a broken voice. Your son is fine without you. He has always been better off without you. She grabbed my arm forcefully and pulled me toward the door. Let me go, I shouted, but she was stronger. She pushed me into the hallway of the building. Your mother is going to ruin our Christmas, she yelled at Jason as she threw me out, and then she slammed the door in my face. I stood in front of that closed door, unable to move. My legs were shaking, I don't know if from the cold or the shock. I knocked on the door with my knuckles. Once, twice, 10 times. Jason, please, open up. It's your mother. Nothing. I only heard the music inside, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. It was as if I had never existed, as if the last 72 years of my life were a mistake someone was erasing. I pressed my ear against the wood. I could hear Brittany's voice saying something I couldn't quite catch, and then everyone's loud laughter. They were laughing. Maybe at me. The hallway was empty and dark. Only a flickering light at the end of the corridor. I searched for my phone in my purse with trembling hands and dialed Jason's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, he answered. Mom? He said with an annoyed voice. Jason, son, please, let me in. It is freezing out here. There was a long silence. Too long. Mom, I think it's better if you go home. Brittany is very upset, and I don't want to ruin the night. I felt something inside me break into 1,000 pieces. Ruin the night? Jason, you left me outside like a dog. Don't exaggerate, Mom. Just go home, and we'll talk tomorrow. And he hung up. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold floor of the hallway. Tears ran down my cheeks uncontrollably. How had it come to this? The boy who hugged me every night before sleeping. The one who cried when I went to work. The one who told me I was the best mom in the world, was now leaving me thrown out like trash. I dialed his number again. He didn't answer. Again. Voicemail. One more time. Nothing. I sent a text message. Jason, please, I don't have money for a cab. It is 20 degrees. Just let me in for a moment. Delivered. Read. No response. Minutes passed. Then an hour. My fingers were numb. I stood up and walked toward the building's entrance. Maybe I could stay in the vestibule until the night passed. But when I tried to open the inner glass door, it was locked. Only residents with a key fob could enter. I knocked on the glass, hoping someone would pass by. No one. Outside, the street was deserted. It was Christmas Eve. Everyone was with their families. Everyone except me. I sat on the concrete step of the entrance, hugging myself, trying to conserve some heat. The wind blew hard and cut through the old coat I was wearing. A car drove by slowly. A family. Children in the back seat with Santa hats. Parents in the front, singing carols. They saw me and kept going. An old woman sitting in the doorway of a building on Christmas Eve was not their problem. I tried to call my friend Susan, but I remembered she was traveling, visiting her daughter in another city. I had no one else. Arthur was always my world, and when he died, Jason became my only anchor. Now that anchor had cut me loose, and I was adrift, sinking in an ocean of loneliness and cold. The hours passed with a cruel slowness. Every minute felt like an eternity. My lips were cracked. My hands weren't responding well anymore. I got up and walked in circles in front of the building, trying to keep my circulation going. A drunk man walked by, stumbling, and shouted something at me that I didn't understand. I got scared and went back to sit against the glass door. At 2 a.m, I tried to sleep. I closed my eyes and rested my head against the cold brick wall. But the cold was so intense I couldn't. Every time I was about to fall asleep, a shiver would wake me up. I thought of Arthur, of how he would never have allowed this, of how he hugged me every night and told me that as long as he lived, I would never be alone. A lie. I was more alone than ever. I thought of all the times I woke up at 3 a.m. when Jason was a baby to feed him. Of all the nights I stayed awake when he had a fever, praying for him to get well. Of all the sacrifices Arthur and I made to give him an education, clothes, food. And now I was here, dying of cold, while he ate turkey and toasted with his wife's family. At 5 a.m, I stopped feeling my feet. I looked at them, and they were pale, almost gray. I tried to move them, but the pain was unbearable. My breathing had become slow and shallow. I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. I tried to stand up, but my legs didn't respond. I fell sideways onto the icy concrete. I tried to scream, but my voice was barely a whisper. "Help," I murmured. No one heard me. The sky was beginning to lighten. Soon it would be Christmas Day. What irony. The celebration of birth, and here I was, dying. I closed my eyes. I no longer had the strength to keep them open. I thought maybe it was better this way. Maybe it was my time to go with Arthur, to leave this world that didn't want me anymore. I felt my body surrendering little by little. The cold didn't bother me as much anymore. A strange kind of peace invaded me. I heard voices in the distance. Or maybe it was my imagination. Voices shouting, footsteps running, someone shaking my shoulder. Ma'am, wake up." But I was already very far away, floating somewhere between life and death. The next thing I remember is a constant beeping. Bright white lights, the smell of disinfectant. I opened my eyes slowly and saw a white ceiling with yellowish stains. I turned my head with effort. I was in a small room. A green curtain surrounded my bed. There was a machine beeping next to me with numbers I didn't understand. An IV connected to my arm. I tried to sit up, but the pain in my chest stopped me. "Don't move, ma'am. You are in the hospital," a voice said. A young nurse appeared by my bed. "You had severe hypothermia. You almost didn't make it." "What happened?" I asked with a hoarse voice. "A neighbor from the building found you this morning when he was going out to buy bagels. He called the ambulance immediately. It arrived just in time." I closed my eyes. A stranger, a neighbor, saved my life. Not my son, a stranger. "Is there anyone we can call?" "Family?" the nurse asked. I thought of Jason, of Brittany, of that closed door. "No," I replied. "I don't have anyone." She looked at me with a mixture of pity and sadness that made me feel even smaller. "It's okay. Rest. The doctor will come to see you soon." She left, leaving me alone again. I cried in silence. Tears ran down my temples and got lost in the white pillow. Not tears of physical pain, tears of abandonment, of betrayal, of unrequited love. My son had left me to die, literally, and the worst part was that I still loved him. I still wanted him to walk through that door, to hug me, to tell me it had all been a terrible misunderstanding. But hours passed, and no one came. I was discharged 2 days later. 2nd-degree hypothermia, severe dehydration, early frostbite on 3 toes of my left foot. The doctor explained everything with a serious voice, while I nodded without really listening. She handed me a bag with medications I wouldn't be able to afford, and a sheet with instructions I probably wouldn't follow. "You are lucky to be alive, Eleanor. At your age, a night like that can be deadly," she told me before signing my discharge papers. Lucky. What a strange word to describe what had happened to me. I left the hospital in a cab that I paid for with the last $30 I had in my wallet. The driver tried to make conversation. "Did you have a good Christmas, ma'am?" I looked out the window without answering. The streets were full of families walking, children with new toys, couples holding hands. The world had kept turning while I was in that hospital room. Life had continued without caring about my pain. "It's here," I said when we arrived in front of my building. I got out slowly. Every movement hurt. I climbed the stairs clinging to the railing. 3rd floor. Apartment 308. I opened the door, and the silence hit me like a slap. The apartment smelled stale. Like old sadness, the curtains were drawn, and light barely entered. On the living room table, the coffee cups from 3 days ago remained, from before everything collapsed. I let myself fall onto the worn sofa where Arthur used to sit and read. I ran my fingers over the frayed fabric. I could still feel his presence here. I still expected to hear his voice calling me from the kitchen. But there was only silence. Silence and that emptiness that eats you from the inside until there is nothing left. I checked my phone. 14 missed calls. For a second, my heart jumped, thinking it was Jason. But no, they were all from unknown numbers. Probably debt collectors. My Social Security check barely covered rent and utilities. The medications I needed after Arthur's death had left me in debt. And now I had more medical expenses I couldn't cover. I opened the messaging app. Nothing from Jason. Not even an "Are you okay?" I wrote a message. I was in the hospital. I almost died that night. I stared at it for 5 minutes before deleting it. What for? If he cared, he would have called already. I dragged myself to the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator. 3 eggs, a half-gallon of milk that was probably spoiled, a piece of stale bread. I closed the door. I wasn't hungry anyway. I walked to my bedroom and lay down fully dressed. The bed was cold. Everything was cold. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but the images of that night returned over and over again. Brittany's face full of contempt. Jason's weak voice choosing her over me. The cold penetrating my bones. The moment I thought I would die alone on that step. The following days passed in a gray fog. I got up, sat on the sofa, stared at the wall. Sometimes not even that. Sometimes I just stayed in bed staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks. 1, 2, 7, 15. I lost count. I lost the desire to count them. Susan returned from her trip and came to see me. She rang the doorbell persistently until I opened. Eleanor, my God, what happened to you? She stood in the doorway looking at me like I was a ghost. I probably looked like one. I hadn't showered in days. I was wearing the same clothes I left the hospital in. My hair was a gray tangle. Come in, I said without emotion. Susan entered, and her face changed when she saw the state of the apartment. Dirty dishes, clothes thrown around, curtains closed. Eleanor, tell me what happened. And I told her everything. Every word was like swallowing glass, but I told her. The Christmas dinner, Brittany throwing me out, Jason hanging up the phone, the night on the street, the hospital. Susan cried. I didn't have any tears left. That bastard, she murmured, clenching her fists. I'm going to go talk to him right now. No, I said, grabbing her arm. I don't want them to know where I am. I don't want their pity. Pity? Eleanor, they left you to die. That is not something you forgive. But I wasn't thinking about forgiveness. I was thinking about survival, about how I was going to pay next month's rent, about how I was going to buy food, about how I was going to keep going when every cell in my body screamed at me to give up. Susan stayed with me that afternoon. She cleaned the apartment, made food, forced me to shower. You're going to get through this, she told me before leaving. I don't know how, but you're going to get through this. I just nodded. I didn't believe her. I didn't believe anything at that moment. A week later, the money ran out. Completely. I opened my wallet and found $2.50. $2 to make it to the end of the month. I checked all the drawers, all the pockets, under the mattress, nothing. Arthur always kept something for emergencies, but I had spent it all on the funeral and my medicines. I looked at the calendar. 15 days until my next check. 15 days without money, without food, without anything. I thought about calling Jason, about begging him, but my pride, the only thing I had left, stopped me. That night I made a decision. If I was going to survive, I had to get out of that apartment. The memories were killing me faster than the hunger. Every corner reminded me of Arthur. Every object reminded me of Jason when he was a boy. I couldn't stay there waiting to die. I looked online for cheap motels. I found one 30 minutes away, $20 a night. Impossible. I kept looking. There was a flop house in a bad neighborhood that charged $40 for the week. I would have to get the money somehow. The next day, I went out to the street. I walked for hours looking for work. Anything. Cleaning, childcare, whatever. Sorry, we're looking for younger people, they told me over and over. We don't have positions available for people your age. Every rejection was another blow. I returned to the apartment with destroyed feet and a destroyed soul. I sat in the kitchen and looked at the phone. I had a message. Unknown number. Miss Eleanor, this is the building manager. You are 2 months behind on rent. If you don't pay by Friday, we will have to begin eviction proceedings. 2 months behind. With Arthur's death and the medical expenses, I had fallen behind and never could catch up. Now I had 4 days to get $1,200 or end up on the street. $1,200 might as well be $1 million. I called my bank. My account had $18. I called Social Security. My check would arrive in 2 weeks. There is no way to advance it, ma'am. I hung up. I sat in that empty kitchen until it got dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there, in the dark, feeling my life crumble completely. Friday arrived. I didn't have the money. The manager knocked on my door at 9 in the morning. Miss Eleanor, I am very sorry about this, but I have to ask you to vacate the apartment. Please, I begged him. I just need 2 more weeks. My check arrives, and I will be able to pay. He shook his head. I have orders from the landlord. I am very sorry. He gave me until the end of the day to pack my things. I closed the door and slid down it to the floor. This was the end. The real end. I packed my life into 2 old suitcases. Clothes, some documents, pictures of Arthur, the watch I gave him on our 30th anniversary. That was it. 72 years reduced to 2 suitcases I could barely carry. I looked at the empty apartment one last time. The walls where our pictures hung. The window where Arthur used to sit to watch the sunset. The door Jason walked out of on his wedding day, promising me he would never abandon me. All lies, all dust. I closed the door and went down the stairs, dragging the suitcases. Every step was a goodbye. Every step took me further away from the only life I knew. Outside, the sun shone with cruel irony. A beautiful day to become homeless. I walked to the bus stop. I had no destination. I just knew I needed to get away. I got on the first bus that passed and sat in the back, by the window. I paid with coins I had gathered from the bottom of my purse. The bus started, and I watched my building disappear in the distance. 40 years living there, 40 years vanishing in a second. An older woman next to me looked at me with curiosity. Traveling? She asked kindly. Something like that, I replied without turning to look at her. I didn't want conversation. I didn't want pity. I got off in an area I didn't know. Dirty streets, peeling buildings, people sitting on corners. I walked looking for the motel I had seen online. I found it after half an hour. Starlight Motel, said the rusted sign with half the letters burnt out. An overweight man in a stained shirt attended me at the front desk. It smelled like cigarettes and fried food. $40 a week, paid in advance, he said without looking me in the eye. I handed him the last $40 I had. He gave me a key with a broken plastic tag. Room 12. At the end of the hall. The room was worse than I imagined. A twin bed with a sunken mattress and stains I preferred not to identify. A window with cracked glass facing an alley full of trash. A tiny bathroom with broken tiles and a toilet that dripped constantly. The walls were so thin I could hear every conversation, every scream, every thump from the neighbors. I left the suitcases on the floor and sat on the bed. The mattress creaked under my weight. This was my home now. This miserable room that smelled of dampness and desperation. I lay down fully dressed and looked at the mold-stained ceiling. How had I ended up here? The days in that motel were the darkest of my life. I woke up without reason, without purpose. I went out to walk because staying in that room was suffocating. I bought cheap bread and made it last as long as possible. A $2 loaf fed me for 3 days. I drank water from the bathroom tap, even though I knew I shouldn't. My stomach protested constantly, but I didn't have money for anything else. I spent hours in the park watching families. Mothers pushing strollers, fathers playing with their children, old couples holding hands. Me, sitting on a bench, invisible to everyone. One afternoon, I tried to use a coffee vending machine. I put in my last coins, $1.25. The machine made noises, lit up, and nothing came out. I stood in front of it, feeling the tears starting to well up. A damn coffee. I couldn't even have a damn coffee. I hit the machine with frustration. Once, twice, until my knuckles hurt. A security guard approached. "Ma'am, you can't do that." I walked away without saying anything, head down, feeling people's stares, the crazy old lady hitting machines. That was me now. The nights were worse. The motel filled with noises. Fights. Loud music. Doors slamming. One night, I heard a couple arguing in the room next door. Screams, insults, something breaking. Then, silence. A silence that was scarier than the screams. I covered my ears with the pillow, but it was useless. Another night, someone tried to open my door. The doorknob jiggled for eternal minutes. I held my breath, paralyzed with fear. Finally, they left. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed sitting on the bed, hugging my knees, waiting for dawn. I thought about Jason constantly, about whether he had noticed my absence, about whether he had tried to call me. I checked my phone obsessively, even though I knew there was nothing. 0 calls, 0 messages. To him, I didn't exist anymore. I wondered if Brittany had told him about the hospital. If he knew I almost died that night, and if he knew if he cared, probably not. He was probably happy in his perfect life, in his warm apartment, with his wife who had him exactly where she wanted him. I had just been a nuisance that had finally disappeared. A week after arriving at the motel, I ran completely out of money. Not a penny. I searched all my pockets, the bottom of the suitcases, among the clothes. Nothing. I had 3 days to pay for another week, or they would throw me out on the street. I thought of options. I could call Susan, but she had already helped me so much and barely had enough for herself. I could look for a shelter, but the idea of sleeping in a room shared with strangers terrified me. I could call Jason. That option hovered in my head like a tempting demon. Just one call. Just ask him for help once. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered his voice telling me to go home. His choice. His abandonment. The day the motel payment was due, I went out to walk. I couldn't be in that room waiting for them to kick me out. I walked aimlessly for hours. I passed restaurants where families dined peacefully. Past stores full of clothes I could never buy. Past apartments with lit windows where I imagined happy lives. I sat on a park bench as it got dark. It was cold, but I didn't feel it as much anymore. Or maybe I had gotten used to it. I sat there watching the city lights turn on one by one, beautiful and distant like unreachable stars. I took out my phone. It had 2% battery. Soon it would turn off, and I wouldn't even have a way to charge it. I opened the photo gallery. Photos of Arthur and me on our anniversary. Photos of Jason when he was a boy, his first day of school, his graduation, his wedding. In all those photos, I was smiling. That Eleanor didn't exist anymore. That Eleanor died on the step of a building on Christmas Eve. This Eleanor was just an empty shell dragging herself through life without knowing why. The phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. Probably spam. I almost didn't open it, but something made me do it. Mrs. Eleanor Gonzalez, I am attorney Michael Sterling. I need to speak with you urgently regarding an inheritance matter. Please contact me at the following number. I read the message 3 times. Inheritance. What inheritance? Arthur had nothing when he died. Only debts. Was it a scam? Those things happened. People taking advantage of desperate seniors. But something about the formal tone of the message made me hesitate. What if it was real? What if there was something? I had nothing to lose. I dialed the number before I thought too much about it. It rang twice. Sterling and Associates. How can I help you? It was a woman's voice. Professional. This is Eleanor Gonzalez speaking. I received a message from attorney Michael Sterling. One moment. Please. Hold music. My heart beat fast. This was ridiculous. Surely it was a scam. They were going to ask me for money I didn't have. Mrs. Eleanor. A man's voice. Mature. Serious. Yes, it's me. Ma'am, I've been looking for you for weeks. I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. It is regarding an inheritance from your aunt, Evelyn Vance. Evelyn. The name hit me like lightning. My father's younger sister. I hadn't heard anything about her in over 30 years. They had fought when I was young and never reconciled. I didn't even know if she was still alive. My Aunt Evelyn died. I said more as a statement than a question. 4 months ago. And she left you as her sole heir. The world stopped. The words floated in my head without finding a place to settle. Heir. Me. It must be a mistake, I managed to say. It is not a mistake, ma'am. I have all the documents here. Can you come to my office tomorrow? It is important that we speak in person. I told him yes. He gave me the address. I hung up. I sat on that bench with the phone in my hand, looking at the black screen reflecting my gaunt face. Was this real? Or had I finally gone crazy? That night I didn't sleep. I lay on that horrible mattress watching the shadows move on the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evelyn's name. My aunt, the woman I barely remembered. Tall, firm voice, always elegantly dressed. The last time I saw her was at my father's funeral. She arrived late, stayed in the back during the entire ceremony, and left without talking to anyone. After that, total silence. Not a letter, Not a call. 32 years of nothing. And now she leaves me an inheritance? It made no sense. Maybe the lawyer had the wrong person. Maybe there was another Eleanor Gonzalez. But he had said my aunt's full name, Evelyn Vance. It couldn't be a coincidence. At 6 in the morning, I got up. I showered with the lukewarm water that dripped from that rusty showerhead. I put on the only decent clothes I had. Black pants that were now too big on me because I had lost so much weight, and a gray blouse that was once white. I looked at myself in the broken bathroom mirror. A haggard woman stared back. Sunken eyes, pale skin, disheveled gray hair. I tried to fix myself up a bit, but it was useless. Poverty showed in every wrinkle, in every tired movement. I left the motel at 7. The lawyer's office was on the other side of the city. I walked to the bus stop. I only had 50 cents left. Not enough for the fare. I would have to walk. I calculated it was about 5 miles. My feet still hadn't fully recovered from that Christmas night, but I had no choice. I started walking. The streets were almost empty at that hour. Just some early workers and street sweepers. I passed by bakeries that had just opened. The smell of fresh bread made me dizzy with hunger. I hadn't eaten anything since yesterday at noon. A piece of stale bread I had saved. I kept walking, ignoring the pain in my feet and the emptiness in my stomach. 2 hours later, I arrived at the address the lawyer had given me, a tall, modern building in the financial district downtown. Dark glass, doorman at the entrance, lobby with shiny marble. I felt completely out of place. The doorman looked at me with suspicion when I tried to enter. "Where are you going, ma'am?" His tone made it clear he thought I didn't belong there. "I have an appointment with attorney Michael Sterling. 12th floor. He checked something on his computer. Name? Eleanor Gonzalez. More typing. Finally, he nodded. "You can go up." He pointed to the elevators as if he were afraid I was going to dirty his precious lobby. I went up to the 12th floor. The elevator doors opened to an elegant reception area. Hardwood floors, expensive paintings on the walls, leather armchairs. A young, perfectly groomed receptionist smiled at me with that professional smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "How can I help you?" "I am here to see Mr. Sterling. I am Eleanor Gonzalez." "Ah, yes, he is expecting you. Please, take a seat. I will let him know you arrived." I sat in one of those uncomfortable chairs that are more for looks than for sitting. 10 minutes passed, 15, 20. I started thinking this was a mistake. That at any moment they would tell me they had made a mistake and throw me out of there. "Mrs. Eleanor Gonzalez?" A man of about 50. Impeccable suit. Perfectly combed hair. "I am Michael Sterling. A pleasure to finally meet you. Please, come into my office." I followed him down a hallway with more expensive paintings. His office was huge. Dark wood desk, shelves full of legal books, windows overlooking the whole city. I sat in a chair across from his desk. He settled on the other side and opened a thick folder. "Mrs. Eleanor, I am very sorry it took us so long to locate you. Your Aunt Evelyn passed away 4 months ago and left very specific instructions that you were her sole heir." He took out several documents from the folder and placed them in front of me. Death certificate, will, deeds. My name appeared on all of them. Eleanor Carmen Gonzalez Vance. It was real. This was completely real. "Why me?" I asked with a trembling voice. I didn't speak to her in over 30 years. I didn't even know she was still alive. Michael leaned back in his chair. "Your aunt never married. She didn't have children. Apparently she followed you closely all these years, although she never contacted you. In her will, she left a letter for you. Here it is." He handed me a yellowed envelope with my name written in elegant, old-fashioned calligraphy. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Eleanor," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I know I have no right to ask you for anything after so many years of silence. The fight with your father drove me away from the whole family, and my pride didn't let me return. But I watched you always. I knew about your wedding to Arthur. I knew when Jason was born. I knew when your father died, and I wanted to go. But cowardice won. I watched how you built an honest, hard-working life. I saw how you loved with all your heart, and I decided that when I died, everything I have would be yours. Because of our whole family, You are the only one who deserves something good. I leave you my apartment, my savings, and my apologies for not being the aunt I should have been. Use it well. Be happy. With love, Evelyn. Tears ran down my face uncontrollably. The lawyer passed me a box of tissues discreetly. Take your time, he said with genuine kindness. I read the letter 2 more times. Evelyn had been watching me all this time. She had seen my life from a distance. And now, when I was at my lowest moment, she was reaching out her hand from the grave. What exactly did she leave me? I asked, wiping my tears. Michael smiled. A 3-bedroom apartment in the Kensington, one of the most exclusive buildings in the city, and a savings account with approximately $250,000. The world stopped again. $250,000. I repeated the number in my head to make sure I had heard it right. 250,000. Yes, ma'am. Your aunt was a very careful woman with her money. She worked as an accountant for 40 years and never overspent. All of that is yours now. I couldn't breathe. A week ago, I was living in a miserable motel with $0 in my pocket. 2 weeks ago, I almost froze to death on a step. And now this. Is there a mistake? Are you sure it's me? I asked for the 3rd time. He laughed softly. Completely sure. I have your birth certificate, your identification in our records. It is you, without a doubt. The apartment is ready for you to move in whenever you want. Here are the keys. He handed me a set of new keys. I took them, feeling the weight of the metal in my hand. Keys to a new life. Keys to a second chance. And the money? I need you to sign some documents to transfer the account to your name. It might take a few days, but I can advance you something for your immediate expenses if you need it. If I needed it? I was living in a fleabag motel about to be evicted. Yes, please, I said, trying to maintain composure. How much do you need? I don't know. Enough to eat something. My voice broke on that last word. Michael looked at me with compassion. He didn't say anything, but his eyes said everything. He knew. He knew I was destitute. He opened a safe behind his desk and took out an envelope. Here. There are $5,000 in cash here. It is an advance on your inheritance. You can consider it a loan if that makes you feel better, but legally it is already your money. He handed me the envelope. I opened it and saw more bills than I had seen together in my life. $5,000. I started crying again. I couldn't help it. All the tension, all the fear, all the pain of the last few weeks came out in uncontrollable weeping. Michael stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. It's okay. Let it out. It's been hard, hasn't it? I couldn't answer. I just nodded while I cried. I cried for Arthur, for Jason, for that night in the cold, for the horrible motel, for the coffee machine that swallowed my last coins, for all the times I thought it would be better to be dead, and I cried with relief. Because against all odds, against all logic, there was a way out. There was a light at the end of the tunnel, the dark tunnel I had been in. Do you want someone to accompany you to the apartment? Michael asked when I finally calmed down. No. I want to go alone. I needed to process this. I needed to see with my own eyes that it was real before letting myself believe it completely. I left that office with the keys in one hand and the envelope with money in the other. I went down in the elevator feeling like I was floating. In the lobby, the doorman held the door for me with a bow he hadn't given me before. Maybe Michael had told him something, or maybe he smelled the money on me. Outside, the sun shone differently. The streets looked different. Or maybe I was the one seeing differently. I hailed a cab, something I hadn't been able to do in weeks. To the Kensington, I told the driver. He nodded and took off. I looked out the window watching the city pass. The same city where hours ago I was walking with destroyed feet and an empty stomach. But now everything had changed. Absolutely everything. The Kensington was exactly what you would expect from a place where people with money lived. Pale stone facade, perfectly manicured planters, entrance with double glass doors and gold frames. The doorman, an older gentleman in an impeccable uniform, opened the door for me with a genuine smile. Welcome. How can I help you? I am here for Evelyn Vance's apartment. His expression changed immediately to one of respect mixed with sadness. Ah, Mrs. Evelyn. A great woman. We miss her very much around here. You must be the niece. Attorney Sterling let us know you would be coming. "I am Frank, the head doorman. Anything you need, I am at your service." We went up in an elevator with mirrors and a marble floor. Nothing like the building where I lived before, where the elevator smelled of urine and half the buttons didn't work. Frank pressed the button for the 15th floor. "Your aunt lived here for 20 years. She was very loved in the building, always kind, always proper. The last few months she was sick, but she never complained." He talked to me about Evelyn during the whole ride, about how she helped neighbors, how she left generous tips at Christmas, how she always asked about everyone's families. A woman I never really knew. A woman who shared my blood but was a stranger all my life. The doors opened on the 15th floor, wide hallway with thick carpet that muffled every step, warm lights on the walls, dark wood doors with gold numbers. Frank guided me to apartment 1503. "Here it is. Do you want me to accompany you inside, or do you prefer to be alone?" "Alone, please." He nodded. "I will be downstairs if you need me." And again, "Welcome home." He left me in front of that door. Home. What a strange word for a place I had never seen. I put the key in the lock. My hands trembled slightly. Turn. Click. The door opened. The apartment took my breath away. Natural light flooded in through huge floor-to-ceiling windows. Spacious living room with elegant but comfortable furniture. Cream-colored sofas, glass coffee table, shelves full of books, paintings on the walls. Not cheap prints, but real paintings. Everything was impeccably clean. Everything in its place. I walked slowly, almost afraid to touch anything. The kitchen was modern, with appliances that looked like they were taken from a magazine. Wood cabinets, granite countertops, everything gleaming. I opened the refrigerator. It was empty and off, obviously, but it was beautiful, spacious, the type of refrigerator where you could keep food for an entire family. I continued exploring. 3 bedrooms. Just as the lawyer had said, the master was huge. King-size bed with carved wood headboard, built-in closets, private bathroom with tub and separate shower. The other 2 rooms were smaller, but just as beautiful. One had a desk and shelves, converted into an office. The other was empty, only with white curtains moving gently with the breeze coming through a cracked window. I stood in the middle of that empty room, processing everything. This was mine. All this was mine. A week ago, I was sleeping on a mattress infested with who knows what, and now I had this. I went back to the living room and sat on the sofa. It was so soft I sank into it. I looked around trying to find traces of Evelyn. Photos on the shelves. I got closer to see them. Evelyn at different stages of her life. Young, in black and white, with an elegant 60s dress. More mature, on some beach, smiling under a big hat. Older, sitting on this very sofa reading a book. And then I saw a photo that made me stop. It was me. Or rather, it was a photo of me I didn't remember existing. I must have been about 25, just married to Arthur. We were outside our first house, hugging, smiling at the camera. How had Evelyn gotten this photo? I took the frame carefully. On the back, there was a date written in pencil. 1978. The year of my wedding. Evelyn had been there, somewhere, watching, taking photos, keeping memories of a niece her pride didn't allow her to approach. I kept looking through the photos. More photos of me. At the hospital when Jason was born, on his first day of school. At his graduation, all taken from a distance, all with that small and precise handwriting on the back. Evelyn had documented my entire life without me seeing her, without me even suspecting her presence. The tears returned, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from something more complex. Gratitude mixed with sadness for all the lost time. I stayed in that apartment until it got dark, simply sitting, looking, touching things carefully as if they were going to disappear. When I finally left, Frank was still at his post. "Everything okay, Mrs. Eleanor?" "Yes, everything is perfect." "I'm glad. Do you need help with moving or anything?" I thought of my 2 miserable suitcases in that horrible motel. "Not yet. First I need to arrange some things." He nodded. "When you are ready, let me know. I know people who can help you." I thanked him and went out to the street. The cool night air cleared my mind. I needed to think. I needed to make a plan. First, I went to a restaurant, a real one, not a street stand. I sat at a table by the window and ordered a full meal. Soup, Roast, chicken, salad, dessert. When the food arrived, I almost cried again. It smelled so good. It tasted so good. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, feeling my body give thanks after weeks of hunger. The waitress looked at me curiously. I probably looked weird. An old lady eating alone, crying over her plate of chicken. I didn't care. I paid the bill with one of those new bills. $50 for a dinner that included a generous tip. I hadn't been able to do something like that in months. Afterward, I went to a clothing store. I needed something decent. Something that wasn't this faded gray blouse and these pants that hung off my body. The saleswoman attended me with that professional politeness they give you when they don't know if you have money or not. Looking for something in particular? Comfortable clothes. For every day. And maybe something more elegant. She showed me options. Pants, blouses, a wine-colored dress that was beautiful. I tried them all on. When I saw myself in the mirror with new, clean clothes that fit me well, I almost didn't recognize myself. I bought everything. $300 in clothes. The kind of expense that before would have kept me awake for weeks. Now it barely made a dent in that envelope with $5,000. I returned to the motel around 9 at night. The manager looked at me surprised. I thought you had already left. I am here for my things. I went up to that miserable room for the last time. I packed my 2 suitcases quickly. I didn't want to spend a second more than necessary there. When I went down, I handed the keys to the manager. You owe me 3 days, he said, checking his ledger. Keep the change, I replied. He seemed surprised, but didn't argue. I left dragging my suitcases, feeling like I was leaving behind the worst stage of my life. I took a cab straight to the Kensington. Night move, joked the driver. Something like that, I replied, smiling for the first time in weeks. Frank received me with surprise. I didn't expect to see you so soon, Mrs. Eleanor. Change of plans. Could you help me with the suitcases? Of course. We went up to the apartment. I left the suitcases in the master bedroom and let myself fall onto that huge, soft bed. The mattress wrapped around me like a hug. I closed my eyes, feeling the difference. Silence. Peace. Safety. No noise of fights. No doors slamming. No fear of someone trying to break in. Just blessed silence and this bed that seemed made of clouds. I fell asleep like that, dressed, with my shoes on, deeper than I had slept in months. I woke up with the sun coming through the windows. It took me a second to remember where I was. Then everything came back. The lawyer. The inheritance. This apartment. It hadn't been a dream. I got up and went to the bathroom. I took a long, hot shower. Water with perfect pressure, ideal temperature, soap that smelled of lavender. I stayed under the water until my fingers wrinkled. When I got out, I wrapped myself in a big, soft towel I found in the bathroom closet. I got dressed in some of the new clothes. I looked in the mirror. You could still see the fatigue in my eyes, the deep lines in my face. But there was something different. A shine. A spark that had been extinguished. I went down to the reception. Frank was there along with another younger employee. Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. Did you sleep well? Better than in years. It was true. Do you need anything? Directions to the area? Store recommendations? I need information. I approached the counter. My Aunt Evelyn. Did she have other properties? Other apartments in this building? Frank thought for a moment. Yes. I think she had 2 more. One on the 8th floor and another on the 10th floor. She rented them out. My heart started beating faster. Do you know who lives there? I would have to check the records. Why? An idea was taking shape in my mind. An idea that started small but grew with every second. Simple curiosity, I lied. Could you get me that information? Sure. I'll bring you the data in a moment. While I waited, I took out my phone. I searched the internet for the building where Jason lived, Parkview Towers. A more modest building than this one, but in a decent area. I looked for more information. Owned by Vance Investments. Vance, Evelyn's last name, my father's last name, my maiden name. It couldn't be. It couldn't be such a perfect coincidence. Frank returned with a folder. Here it is. Apartment 803 is rented to a Mr. Dave Ramirez, and 1002 is rented to. He paused, checking the paper. Jason Fuentes and Brittany Martinez. The world stopped for the third time in 2 days. Jason. My son lived in an apartment owned by my aunt. In an apartment that was now mine. Are you sure? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Frank checked the paper again. Yes, Jason Fuentes and Brittany Martinez. They have been living there almost 3 years. They always pay on time, although the last 2 months they were a little late. The last 2 months. Just since Arthur died. Just since I started falling into the abyss. I took the paper with hands that were no longer trembling. I no longer felt sadness. I felt something different. Something cold and clear like spring water. Who manages those apartments? An external company. Velasco Management. Your aunt preferred not to get directly involved with the tenants. Perfect. That was perfect. I returned to my apartment and sat at the office desk. I took out all the documents Michael had given me. Sure enough, there they were. 3 properties in the Kensington. And upon reviewing more papers, I found something else. Vance Investments was a company Evelyn had created 20 years ago, owner of 6 residential buildings in the city. One of them was Parkview Towers, the building where Jason lived. My aunt was the owner, and now I was the owner. My son, the one who abandoned me on the street to die, lived in an apartment that belonged to me. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. I called Michael. Mrs. Eleanor, what a pleasure to hear from you so soon. Everything okay with the apartment? Perfect. I have some questions about the properties. Sure, tell me. I saw that Evelyn had a company, Vance Investments. Is that also mine now? Absolutely. You are the sole shareholder and director. The company manages 6 residential buildings in the city. They generate a monthly income of approximately $20,000 after expenses. $20,000 a month. Besides the $250,000 in savings, besides this apartment. Evelyn hadn't just saved me, she had given me power. Can I make changes to the administration? It is your company. You can do whatever you want. I spent the next 3 days studying everything. Every document, every contract, every detail of the buildings. Evelyn had been meticulous. Everything was perfectly organized, perfectly legal, perfectly documented. I discovered that Jason and Brittany paid $1,200 in monthly rent, a very reasonable price for that apartment. I also discovered that they had a lease expiring in 2 months, and that according to company policies, any rent increase had to be notified 60 days in advance. The timing was perfect. Everything was perfect. It was as if Evelyn had planned it from heaven. I contacted Velasco Management. I asked for a meeting with the manager. I introduced myself as the new owner of Vance Investments. The manager, a man of about 40 named Mike, received me with immediate respect. Mrs. Gonzalez, it is an honor. Your aunt was an excellent client for years. We are very sorry for her passing. Thank you. I want to review some contracts. Specifically, for the Parkview Towers building. I gave him Jason's apartment number. Mike searched in his system. Here it is. The tenants are punctual generally, although, as I mentioned, there were recent delays. Is there a problem? I want to make some changes, I said with a firm voice. The lease expires soon. I need them to be notified that the rent will increase to $2,000 a month. Mike blinked, surprised. That is an increase of almost 70%, ma'am. It is legal, but it is quite aggressive. It is my decision. Of course. Anything else? Yes. From now on, any late payment will result in immediate fines, without exceptions. And if they are more than 15 days late, start eviction proceedings. Mike looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. He probably expected a sweet and understanding old lady, not this woman of steel who had risen from the ashes. Understood. It will be done as you order. One more thing. All matters related to that apartment must go through me personally. Any request, any complaint, anything, I want to be informed. May I ask why that apartment specifically? I looked him straight in the eye. It is a personal matter. Is there a problem? No, ma'am, no problem. Good. Very good. I walked out of that office feeling different. I was no longer the Eleanor begging for crumbs of love. I was no longer the Eleanor letting herself be pushed into the street. I was someone else. Someone with power. Someone with control. And that someone was going to collect on every humiliation, every tear, every night of cold. The following days I dedicated to transforming myself completely. I went to the beauty salon. I cut my hair, dyed it to cover the gray. I bought elegant clothes. Not just comfortable, but elegant. Dresses, suits, high heels I hadn't used in years. I went to the doctor for a complete checkup, vitamins, treatments, everything I had neglected for lack of money. I looked in the apartment mirror a week later and saw someone unrecognizable. A 72-year-old woman who looked powerful, cared for, strong. No longer the broken widow, no longer the abandoned mother, the owner, the one calling the shots. 2 weeks after my meeting with Mike, he called me. Mrs. Eleanor, the tenants of apartment 1002, received the rent increase notification. They called very upset. Mrs. Brittany was especially expressive. I smiled. What did they say? That it is unfair, that they have been there for years, that they can't pay that amount. They asked to speak with the owner to negotiate. Tell them the owner does not negotiate. Either they accept the new price or look for another place. Understood. They also mentioned they will file a formal complaint. Let them file whatever they want. Everything is within the law. I hung up feeling a cold satisfaction. So it began. Thus began the slow squeeze. A week later, Mike called back. They signed the lease with the new price, but they requested a 3-day extension for the first payment because they are adjusting to the increase. Denied. If they don't pay on time, automatic fine. Ma'am, it's just 3 days. Mike, who is the owner here? Silence. You, ma'am. Exactly. No extensions. They paid on time. Just on the last day. But I learned through Mike that they had to borrow money. Perfect. I wanted them to feel pressure. I wanted every day to be a little harder. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just a slow financial strangulation drowning them without them fully understanding why. I decided to observe them. Not directly. That would be too obvious. But I hired someone, a discreet investigator Michael recommended. I want to know everything about Jason Fuentes and Brittany Martinez. Their routines, their jobs, their financial situation, everything. The investigator handed me a full report a week later. Jason worked in sales. Good salary, but not exceptional. Brittany didn't work. She lived off what Jason earned and credit cards that were reaching their limit. They had debts, car loans, cards, a personal loan they used for the wedding. The rent increase had put them in a critical situation. The report also included more personal details. They fought a lot lately. The neighbors complained about the noise. Brittany had 2 public screaming episodes in the lobby. Jason looked tired, run down. He was drinking more than usual. His performance at work had dropped. Everything was crumbling slowly, and they had no idea who held the strings. They didn't know that the old woman they left to die was now their landlady, was now who controlled their fate. The irony made me smile every time I thought about it. I decided to take the next step. I called Mike. I want to personally inspect all my buildings. Starting with Parkview Towers. When would you like to go? Tomorrow, at 10 in the morning. The next day, I dressed in one of my new suits. Dark gray, elegant, with heels and a pearl necklace I had found in Evelyn's jewelry box. I applied my makeup carefully. I put on large sunglasses, not because I needed to hide, but because they added an air of mystery and power. Mike picked me up in a company car. You look very good, Mrs. Eleanor. Thank you. Let's go. We arrived at Parkview Towers at 10 o'clock sharp. The building looked exactly as I remembered it from that horrible night. The entrance where I stood freezing. The lobby where I begged to be let in. I breathed deep. I wasn't that Eleanor anymore. Now I was the owner of this place. We entered, and the concierge greeted us. Good morning, Mr. Mike. Good morning, Dave. This is Mrs. Eleanor Gonzalez, the new owner. The concierge looked at me with immediate respect. Nice to meet you, ma'am. Welcome. Thank you. We are going to do a general inspection of the building. I want to see the common areas, check maintenance, talk to some residents. We toured the building for an hour. I reviewed everything with a critical eye. There were things needing repair, peeling paint in some hallways, a burnt-out light in the parking lot. Nothing serious, but I noted it all. Mike took notes nervously. I am sorry, ma'am. I will supervise getting everything fixed immediately. I hope so. Finally, we reached the 10th floor. My heart beat faster, but I kept my face serene. I want to review some apartments. Let's start with 1002. Mike hesitated. 1002? Ma'am, that apartment is occupied. We should notify in advance. It is my building. I can inspect it whenever I want. Knock on the door. Mike rang the doorbell. We waited. Nothing. He rang again. I heard footsteps inside. The door opened, and there she was, Brittany, with sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair up in a messy ponytail, no makeup. She looked tired, different from that elegant woman on Christmas Eve. Yes, she said with an annoyed tone. Then she saw Mike, and her expression changed. Oh, Mr. Mike, I didn't know you were coming. Good morning, Mrs. Brittany. She is the new owner of the building. She is doing a general inspection. Brittany looked at me. She looked me straight in the eye. She didn't recognize me. Not a flicker of recognition. To her, I was just another elegant old lady. Not her mother-in-law she left to die. Now, it's not a good time. The apartment is messy, Brittany said, trying to close the door a bit. It won't take us long. I just need to check that everything is in order, I said with a firm and controlled voice. It was the first time I had spoken to her since that night. My voice sounded different, deeper, more confident. Brittany sighed, annoyed. Fine, come in. We entered. The apartment was the same one I remembered, but it looked different, neglected. There were dirty dishes on the living room table, clothes thrown on the sofa, boxes piled in a corner. Excuse the mess. We are going through some changes, Brittany murmured. I walked through the apartment slowly. I checked the windows, the faucets, the walls. Everything worked fine. Of course it worked. Evelyn always kept her properties impeccable, but I needed to find something. Whatever it was. There is a moisture stain on that wall, I said, pointing to a corner of the living room. Mike approached to check. It is very slight, ma'am. Probably condensation. It's not serious. It still must be repaired. Noted. Brittany watched us with arms crossed, clearly irritated by our presence. Anything else? My husband is sleeping. He works the night shift now. Jason working nights. That wasn't in the investigator's report. It meant he had gotten a second job. Good. Let him work double. Let him feel the pressure. One more thing, I said, turning to look at her. I noticed that this month's payment arrived on the last possible day. That creates administrative problems. Brittany clenched her jaw. We paid on time. We weren't late. Technically, no. But barely. I recommend you organize yourselves better. Next month, any delay will result in fines. That is ridiculous. We are good tenants. We have been here for years. And you can stay here as long as you comply with the contract. That is all. I held her gaze. She blinked first. There was something satisfying in that. In seeing her uncomfortable. In seeing her submitted to my authority without knowing who I really was. If there are no more questions, I have things to do, Brittany said, pointing to the door. Of course. One last thing. Are you satisfied with the apartment? Brittany looked at me, confused by the change of tone. Yes, it is a good apartment. Although the rent increase was excessive. The market changes. Prices go up. It is simply business. Something in my voice made her look at me more closely. For a second, I thought she would recognize me. But no. She just frowned and nodded. I understand. Are you done? Yes. Thank you for your time. We left the apartment. I heard Brittany close the door with more force than necessary. Mike looked at me. Everything good, ma'am? Perfect. And it was true. Seeing Brittany uncomfortable, tense, without that power she had that night, was more satisfying than I had imagined. We went down to the lobby. I want a monthly report on that apartment specifically. Any complaint, any problem, anything. I also want to know exactly what day they pay each month. Mike nodded, taking notes. May I ask why the particular interest in that apartment? Let's say I have my reasons. I wasn't going to explain to him. Not yet. Understood. Anything else? Yes. I want maintenance to check that apartment next week. The supposed moisture stain. And any other problem they can find. Check thoroughly. Mike looked at me with a semblance of understanding. He knew something else was going on, but he was professional enough not to ask. It will be done. The next 2 months were a masterpiece of silent pressure. Every week there was something. A surprise inspection. A notification about some building rule they were supposedly violating. Small fines for insignificant things. Nothing illegal. Everything perfectly justified. But constant. Exhausting. The investigator kept me informed. Jason had lost his main job. He only had the night one now. Brittany had tried to look for a job, but without success. The debts grew. The fights were increasingly frequent and violent. The neighbors complained constantly. One day, Mike called me. "Mrs. Eleanor, we have a problem. The neighbors of apartment 1002 are requesting their eviction. Too many noise complaints. Fights at late hours. Even the police have gone twice. And what do you suggest? We could send them a formal warning. If it continues, we would have cause to terminate the lease. Send the warning. And let me see the neighbor complaints." He emailed me everything. I read every complaint carefully. The shouts were always the same. Brittany blaming Jason for their financial situation. Jason defending himself weakly. Her mentioning that everything had started going wrong since his mother disappeared. How ironic. Now I was the problem again, but in a way she would never imagine. I decided to strike the next blow. I called Mike. "The lease for apartment 1002 expires next month. We are not going to renew. Are you sure?" "Technically they are complying with payments now. I don't care. I want them gone. Notify them with 30 days notice as required by law." "Understood." "And if they ask for an extension?" "Denied. 30 days and not one more." Mike sent the notice. 2 hours later my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Mrs. Gonzalez." It was Jason's voice. My son. Speaking to me without knowing it was me. My heart raced, but I kept my voice cold and professional. "Yes, I am Jason Fuentes, tenant of apartment 1002. We received a non-renewal notice, and I need to speak with you." "About what specifically?" I asked, maintaining a distant tone. "It's just that we don't understand why you don't want to renew. We always pay. Well, sometimes a couple of days late, but we pay. Please, we need more time. My wife and I are going through a difficult time." "Difficult time? How convenient." "Mr. Fuentes, it is a business decision, nothing personal. But we have nowhere to go, not with so little time. At least give us 60 days. The law says 30. That is what you will have. Please, Mrs. Gonzalez, I beg you. I have a sick mother. Well, I don't know where she is now, but everything has been very complicated and—" He broke down. I heard his voice crack on the other end of the line. Something inside me moved. For a second, just a second, I wanted to tell him who I was. I wanted to scream at him that his mother wasn't sick, that she was perfectly fine, that she was the one destroying them. But I held back. "I am sorry, Mr. Fuentes. My decision is final." I hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, shaking. I had heard my son beg, I had heard his desperation, and I had said no. Part of me felt powerful, another part felt monstrous, but I couldn't stop now. I had come too far, and they needed to learn. They needed to understand what it felt like to be abandoned, to be rejected, to be left with nothing. The last 30 days were agonizing to watch. The investigator informed me of everything. Jason desperately looking for an apartment, all out of his budget. Brittany increasingly hysterical, blaming him for everything. The boxes piling up, the screams intensifying. One night, the investigator sent me an audio recording one of the neighbors had made. It was Brittany screaming. "All of this is your fault. Your damn mother cursed us before disappearing. Since she left, everything went to hell." And then Jason, with a tired voice. "My mother didn't curse us, Brittany. We abandoned her. I abandoned her. And I think we are paying for that." I listened to that audio 10 times. Jason knew. On some level, he knew this was a consequence of that night. But he still didn't look for me. He still didn't call me. Pride, or shame, or fear kept him away. Good. Let him suffer a little more. On day 29, a day before the deadline expired, I received a call. It was Jason again. "Mrs. Gonzalez, please, I just need to speak with you in person. 5 minutes of your time." Something in his voice broke me. "All right. Come to my office tomorrow at 10. I gave him the address of the Kensington, my building. Thank you so much. I'll be there. That night I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow I would see my son face to face. He still didn't know who his landlady was. How would he react when he saw me? Would he recognize me with my new look? I stood in front of the mirror. The change had been radical. Short, dyed hair, elegant clothes, makeup. But I was still me. I was still his mother. At 9 in the morning, I dressed in my best suit. Black, formal, powerful. I applied my makeup carefully. I put on my sunglasses. At 5 to 10, I went down to the lobby. Frank saw me. Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. You look splendid. Thank you, Frank. I am expecting a visitor. A Mr. Jason Fuentes. When he arrives, show him to the boardroom. At 10 o'clock sharp, Jason entered the building. I saw him from afar. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. He had deep circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes. He walked hunched over, defeated. Frank pointed him toward where to go. I was already seated in the boardroom, back to the door, looking out the window. Mrs. Gonzalez, Jason said, entering. Thank you for seeing me. I turned slowly. I took off my sunglasses. Our eyes met. I saw his face go from confusion to shock to absolute horror. Mom. His voice was barely a whisper. Hello, Jason, I said calmly. He stood paralyzed in the doorway. No, I don't understand. You are Mrs. Gonzalez? You are my landlady? That's right. I stood up. Sit down, please. He didn't move. He was in total shock. But how? When? I don't understand anything. Sit down and I'll explain. Finally, Saturday. Or rather, he let himself fall into a chair. He was shaking. After you left me to die on the street that Christmas Eve, after spending days in the hospital and weeks in a miserable motel, I received an unexpected inheritance from my Aunt Evelyn. Do you remember that name? He shook his head, dazed. Your great-grandmother had a sister, Evelyn. She died and left me everything, including the building where you live. Where I lived? Jason covered his face with his hands. My God, it was you. All this time it was you. The increases, the inspections, the constant pressure. It was you. Yes. Why? His voice broke. Why did you do this to us? I approached him slowly. Why? Jason, you left me lying in the street on Christmas Eve. I almost froze to death. I was in the hospital and you didn't call. I was living in a horrible motel and you didn't care. I disappeared from your life and you didn't even look for me. I thought you wanted space. Brittany said that. Brittany. Always Brittany. Do you know what she told me that night? That I wasn't real family. That I would ruin her Christmas with my sad widow face. Tears ran down Jason's face. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I was a coward. I should have defended you. I should have gone out to find you that night. I have lived with that guilt every day. Guilt? And that guilt stopped you from dialing my number? Did that guilt stop you from going to my apartment? I went. 3 weeks later I went. The landlord said you had been evicted. I didn't know where to find you. Your phone was off. Susan wouldn't tell me anything, I thought. I thought maybe it was better this way. That you hated me so much, it was better to leave you in peace. You hated me, Jason. You chose a woman who humiliated me over your own mother. I know. And Brittany. Brittany changed. Or maybe she was always like that and I didn't want to see it. These months have been hell. The constant fights, her screams, her accusations. She says you cursed us. And she's right. Since that night, everything collapsed. I lost my job, the debts drowned us, and now this. We are going to end up on the street. He knelt in front of me. Literally knelt. Mom, please, forgive me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I was the worst son in the world. But please, give us a little more time. 1 month, 2 months, whatever. I looked at him there, kneeling, crying. My son, the boy I raised, the man who abandoned me. And I felt something complicated. It wasn't pure satisfaction. It wasn't pure pain. It was a strange mixture of justice and sadness. Get up, Jason. He stood up slowly. Where is Brittany in all this? Does she know you came to see me? No, she doesn't know you are the landlady. If she knew what? She would come to insult me again. He looked down. Probably. At least he was honest. Jason, I am going to tell you something, and I want you to listen well. I am not going to renew your lease. You and Brittany have to leave. Mom, please. Let me finish. I am not going to renew because I think that marriage is killing you. I have seen the reports, the fights, the emotional violence. Brittany is destroying you, and you are letting her, just like you let her destroy me. You're right. You're absolutely right. But, I continued, I am not going to leave you on the street. I have another apartment, smaller, in another building, 1 bedroom, for you alone. He looked at me confused. For me alone? Jason, it is time for you to make a decision. Either you continue with Brittany and find your own path without my help, or you leave her and accept this apartment to start over. But I cannot save you if you remain tied to someone who hurts you. I already learned that lesson. He stayed silent for a long time. She is my wife, and I was your mother, and that meant nothing to you when she asked you to choose. Give me 2 days, just 2 days to think about it. You have 1 day. Tomorrow at this time I want your answer. He left stumbling, as if the world had turned upside down, and I guess it was like that for him. The next day, he arrived at 10 o'clock sharp. He entered the boardroom with a suitcase. I'm leaving her. Today. I accept your offer. And Brittany? I told her it's over, that I'm leaving, that she can stay the time remaining in the apartment, but I won't be there. How did she take it? As expected. Screams, insults, threats. But I don't care anymore. You were right. That marriage was killing me, and I was letting myself die just like I left you. I nodded. The apartment is ready. Here are the keys. Weeks passed. Jason started therapy. He got a better job. We had dinner together twice a week. It wasn't the relationship we had before, but it was something. We were rebuilding. Slowly, carefully. One day he asked me, "Do you forgive me, Mom?" I thought about it a lot before answering. I forgive you, Jason, but mainly I forgive myself. For allowing myself to be treated like that. For not valuing myself enough. For believing that love means accepting anything. I learned that self-love is more important than the love of others. And that lesson was worth all the pain. Brittany eventually moved back in with her parents. I learned from Mike that she tried to sue for harassment, but she had no case. Everything had been legal. Jason filed for divorce. We moved forward. Me, in my beautiful apartment. Him, on his path of healing. And Evelyn, from wherever she was, probably smiling. She had given me more than money. She had given me power. She had given me the opportunity to learn that you don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need dramatic revenge to get justice. Sometimes, silence is more powerful than any scream. And sometimes, saving yourself is the most revolutionary act of all.